comfort for others, Allah opens the doors of good for us as well. Have mercy and rahmah upon those who are on earth. Allah will have mercy upon all of us, inshallah. May Allah bless you, may Allah reward you for making and accommodating others. Jazakumullah khair. Brothers and sisters, all praise belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the heavens and the earth. And we seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we seek His guidance. We seek the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we seek refuge in Him from the evils of our own actions. Salutations and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions. Brothers and sisters, at this current moment, we are in the sacred month of Islam known as the month of Rajab. If we look at the Islamic calendar, the Quran itself defines that there are 12 months in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Minha arba'atun hurum. Amongst the 12 months, the Quran itself mentions there are 4 that are considered to be sacred months. Ashhurul Huram, the Quran says. Now, what are these 4 months? The Quran does not identify them, but the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ further explains. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ mentions to us that there are 3 that are continuous, which means continuous one after the other, and one separate from them. So the 4 sacred months in Islam are Dhul Qada, Dhul Hijjah, and the month of Muharram. These are 3 continuous months, and then the month of Rajab. So these are 4 sacred months in Islam. The month that we're in right now is amongst the sacred months in Islam, known as Ashhurul Huram. And the sacredness or the taqaddus or the honor of these months were even prior to Islam that continued. Amongst the significance of this month is that we begin to sort of have a prelude or introduction to the month of Ramadan. The Nabi of Allah ﷺ taught us a dua. Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa balighna Ramadan. That Allah give us blessings and barakah in the month of Rajab and Sha'ban, and allow us to meet or visit or to witness the month of Ramadan. Brothers and sisters, with regards to this month of Rajab, I want to only speak about one small incident, and I wouldn't say small, but from the realms of the seerah of Rasulullah ﷺ, I would like to take one part of his life and connect that with Rajab so that we can take back some lessons this afternoon in this khutbah. So if we look at the seerah and the life of Rasulullah ﷺ, amongst the incidents that took place prior to his life, one of the most major of those incidents were known as the Battle of Tabuk. The Battle of Tabuk occurred in the month of Rajab, this particular month that we're in. And I want to take 2 points from the Battle of Tabuk and from the month of Rajab so that we can prepare for Ramadan. And those 2 points are perseverance and sacrifice. And what does perseverance mean? Perseverance means to handle situation in the times of difficulty with strength and stability and faith, and not be wavered and moved by the challenges and difficulties that come to us, by trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number 2, to be able to give something for the sake of Allah for a greater cause, and that is sacrifice. So perseverance and sacrifice are 2 lessons that I want to take myself and for all of you. Brothers and sisters, the Battle of Tabuk was at a time which was one of the most critical times for the Muslims. It was a time where there was a mist of summer and intense heat. The distance that the Muslims had to travel to Tabuk was far away. It was a time where the Muslims were facing the greatest enemy of the time, the Byzantine Empire. Now, lack of resources, the mist of time where the summer is there in Medina, where the financial stability of those people depends on these few weeks. The weather is extremely hot. The provision and sustenance is not present. And you're facing the greatest army and the enemy that is present on the face of this earth. All odds and challenges are against the Muslims. And now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam announces to the Sahaba that we need to travel towards Tabuk. And we need to face an army with 30,000 individuals. And this is the 9th year of Hijrah, just before the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and before his Hajj, and amongst one of the last of the campaigns of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Sahaba to travel. So and of course, whenever there is khair, whenever there is goodness, the shar, the evil, peeks his head and tries to come. But when the haqq and the truth is so strong, the batil cannot stand. The falsehood cannot stand. There is no effort of making the darkness run away. You just need to bring light. I can't tell darkness to run away. I just need to bring the light. And that's why this is a positivity that we all need to bring in our lives. That we don't need to push the evil, just bring the goodness in our lives. Talk about good. Bring goodness in our lives, in our communities, in our families. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Sahaba, we need to contribute. We need to support. We need to participate. So the evil began to speak around and they begin to say it's too hot. And the Quran says and replies, Qul, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, announce to them that the fire of Jahannam is much more severe than the heat and the summers of the place that you're in. Then the people begin to instigate and they begin to say that, are you really going to leave the rizq that Allah is giving you? The sustenance, the provision, the gardens, the lush places of Medina? Because if they were to tell you, don't leave your gardens, it doesn't look good. So they changed their verbiage. And they said, are you really going to leave the rizq of Allah? What Allah is giving you? But they didn't realize that on the other side was the greater command of Allah. Sacrifice for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what did the Sahaba say who were truly believers? And brothers and sisters, this pierces my heart, and I wish that we can write this somewhere deep down in our minds and our hearts and our lives. And the Sahaba said that we are leaving the rizq, but we're going to the razaq. We are leaving the sustenance, but we're going to the sustainer. We're leaving the provision, but we're going to the provider. And brothers and sisters, the history is a proof that for those who travel for Tabuk, their gardens used to give rizq 2 times a year rather than 1. The barakah that Allah provided. Then when there came a time to give, when there came a time for sacrifice, because brothers and sisters, we as an ummah have fallen back a lot. The month of Rajab, these sacred moments prior to Ramadan, are the time to uplift ourselves. We're already too weak. We need to come out and stand with perseverance and sacrifice for the sake of Allah. For indeed, as an ummah, we need to rise again. The excellence of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because if Allah has given us Quran and Sunnah, then what can put us behind? But we have left that perseverance and sacrifice. So when the time came that we need to give and to sacrifice for the sake of Allah, and brothers and sisters, this is my question to me and all of you, and all of us to take back and ask this, and be genuine to yourself. Where is my time, my wealth, and my resources being spent? And how much of it is being spent upon Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Just ask your own self. My time, my wealth, and my resources. How much of it is being spent for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And when the Sahaba gave these things for the sake of Allah, Allah opened the doors of dunya, where the Sahaba said, if our 7 generations work, they would have never received what Allah gave us because of the slavery of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Your deen, your identity, your Islam is the only source of excellence in this world. We can never flourish without Islam. We can never be honorable without the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when it came the time to give, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, bring forth what you have. And we all know this famous incident that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu took everything that he had in his house, to the point that when he was leaving his house, he removed his clothing and he wore the rag that was hanging on the door, and he wore the rag around him, and he came and he brought whatever he had. And Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, at that day, he thought that this would be the day that I can do a little bit more than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Not because they were looking for titles and excellence and number one and number two. That was never their reason. They were the most mukhlis and sincere of the human beings on the face of this earth. But it was something to do for the sake of Allah. As someone said to Abdullah bin Huzafa radiallahu anhu, a 19-year-old young man in the Khilafah in the time of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, a long story. I wish we can talk about Sahaba more and more, but when his life was about to be taken by the empire of the Romans and he was thrown inside, almost thrown inside the fire, he shed some tears. It's a different story. And he cried. And someone said, Abdullah bin Hudafa, you're scared of death? He says, I'm not scared of death. I'm crying because I only have one life. I wish I had lives as much as the hair of my body. And one after the other I could have given for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why I cry for it. That when it came time to give, I can only give this much that I have. So when came to time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, and Umar radiallahu anh, they brought their belongings and they placed. And usually when you're asked to bring something, you're asked to bring whatever you can. And the responsibility of those that ask is, what did you bring? Whether how much are you giving, mashallah, mashallah donation, how much are you giving, or we announce, whatever it is. But the question changed. And rather than asking what you brought, the Nabi of Allah ﷺ asked, what did you leave behind? And as soon as he asked this question, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu cried. He brought so much. And he cried. And everyone was shocked. And he says, why is Umar crying at this moment? This is a time that he's giving for the sake of Allah. And he said, Abu Bakr, what did you leave behind? He says, I left nothing behind except for the name of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Umar, what did you leave behind? And he cried and he says, I thought this was the day that I would do a little bit more than Abu Bakr. But he says, Wallahi, Umar can never exceed Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. For I left half and I brought half. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, who will provide for the army? And Uthman radiallahu anh said, I will do. Who will provide? I will do. Oh Uthman, who will provide? I will do. To the extent that he went home and he had a bag with gold coins. He couldn't even carry in his own hands. So he took his cloth, his qamis, and he put the coins in his qamis and he brought it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he was sitting in the courtyard of Medina. Imagine Masjid Nabawi. The Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sitting outside on the courtyard preparing for the battle of Tabuk. And he brings the coins that he has in his qamis and he drops it in the lap of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's sitting down. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he drops it in the lap of Rasulullah because it's so much that he can't pick them up. And they all fell to as Rasulullah was sitting leg upon his leg. And all of a sudden Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes this coin and he puts his hand underneath it. And he lifts it to the top and he drops it. And it makes the noise of the coins. And he does this again. He picks up the coins and he drops it. He picks up the coins and he drops it. And he says, oh Uthman, do whatever you want till the day of Qiyamah. Allah has forgiven you. Brothers and sisters, these sacrifices may be fairy tales to many of us. These things might be just stories of the past, of those that came and left. But brothers and sisters, as an ummah, we need to rise. We need to ask ourselves, and no one is being asked to give everything in half and thirds. The only thing is, what am I doing for the deen of Allah and His Rasul? I question my own self for my time for Salatul Fajr in Jama'at, earning of halal, protecting from haram, simple things that Allah has asked us. What am I doing for Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Brothers and sisters, the month of Rajab, the battle of Tabuk, are the times to uplift ourselves with perseverance and sacrifice so that we can prepare ourselves for the coming of the month of Ramadan. And I conclude with this, brothers and sisters. A question that I ask myself and all of you, that when you go back home today and ask yourself, where is my time? Where is my wealth? And where is my energy being spent? If it is not being spent on the deen of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even a portion of it, then I need to question myself. And I need to revisit my entire life and to see how I could do my part. Allah doesn't ask, subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you for a lot. It's whatever little you can do. It's not a lot. It's whatever little you can do. But we need to have the pain, the concern and the worry that I'm not doing enough. When we as an ummah will rise and collectively make that effort, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show us the results that were shown in Tabuk. The excellence of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the most difficult of the times, in the situations that were the most difficult, Allah changed for them. Brothers and sisters, the halat and the conditions of this ummah will also change when we persevere and when we sacrifice for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah give us tawfiq and ability to live our life according to the Quran and the beautiful sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh.